The horn came up out of the dark at 10 minutes past 4. 3 notes on the rise below the church. Anne Westham was already on the stairs with a candle in her hand, because she had not been properly asleep since March, and because the mail was the one clock in her life that had never yet run slow. She had the kitchen door open before the wheels reached the arch. Rain, still. Rain since the middle of June. The lamp over the arch showed the wet backs of the 4 horses, and the guard swinging down with his case under his arm. Behind him, the coachman was shouting for Munn. Behind that was the sound the road always made in a bad summer, a sucking sound, as though the county were trying to swallow its own highways. 4 minutes, the guard said, coming past her into the warm. And your top step is going, Miss Westham. It went in July. Tea or ale? Tea. Ale. Sturge put his hands flat over the fire and did not look at her while he said the rest of it, because he was a man who liked to give news the way other men gave presents, sideways. 2 things for you. The line's pegged. Anne set the pot down on the hob. Her hands went on doing what they were doing, which was a thing she had learned that spring and had not stopped being grateful for. Pegged where? Over Barrow Hill and down through Ludbrook's bottom field. 3 miles shorter, and no hill for the wagons. Bidder had his chain out at Draxton Monday, with 2 of the trustees standing over him like godfathers. Sturge took the cup. They settle it at the Michaelmas meeting. That is the 29th. That is the 29th. She wiped the board where the loaves had been. Above her, in the room over the arch, the boards creaked twice. Somebody's feet finding somebody's floor. And the other thing? Thornhold's home. The rain went on at the window. Down in the yard, Munn was backing the fresh team up under the pole and swearing at them softly, the way he swore at horses, as though they were old friends who had disappointed him. Home, Anne said. Landed at Ramsgate a fortnight since. That's from the office at Draxton, and the office at Draxton had it off his own agent, so you may hang your hat on it. Sturge drank. Nobody's seen him. Not at Ironmore, not at church, not at Draxton. 11-month Duke, and the man has not so much as looked at the roof he's got. 4 minutes is up, said the coachman from the doorway. They went. They always went. The horn sounded again at the top of the rise, thinner. And then there was nothing in the yard but the smell of hot horse and the rain coming down as though it were being paid to do it. Anne stood in the middle of her own kitchen with a wet cloth in her hand, and did the arithmetic she had been doing every day since March. 2 coaches a day down, and 2 up. 14 beds, 6 of them fit for gentry. The mail 4 minutes at the door, and 11 shillings a week from the office for standing it. All of it because the Draxton Road came through Wenlow Cross, and had come through Wenlow Cross since her great-grandfather put a bush over the door and called it a house. 3 miles shorter. No hill for the wagons. She took the candle and went in to look at her father. He was awake. He was often awake at that hour. The horn woke him too, and had woken him for 40 years, and the part of him that had run to it was still there behind his face with nowhere to go. Thomas Westham had been a big man in March. He was still a long man in the bed, but the width had gone off him in 5 months, and the left side of him lay where she put it. "The mail's through," she said. "Sturge says the top step's going. It went in July." His right hand moved on the counterpane. His eyes were exactly as they had always been, brown and quick and not fooled, and they went over her face the way they used to go over a bill. "Nothing," she said. "Rain, go to sleep." She was a poor liar and always had been, and he had known her 23 years. By 5 she had the kitchen fire up, and the bread in, and the slate ruled for the day. By 6 she had been up the bank behind the orchard in the wet grass with her skirts pinned, because the bees wanted feeding, and the bees had wanted feeding all year. That was the summer of 1816, and anybody who kept bees in England that year will tell you what it was. It did not get warm. It rained on the blossom in May, and rained on the beans in June, and the hay lay down and rotted where it stood. Her 9 hives sat in their row under the thatch of the bee shelter, with the entrances no bigger than her thumb, and out of 9, only 3 had stored anything at all. She had been feeding them since Lammas out of last year's jars, the ones with her mother's writing on the paper label. Every jar she opened for the bees was a jar she did not sell. She knelt at the 3rd skep and put her ear against the straw and listened to them. A good hive in August sounds like a kettle a long way off. This one sounded like a kettle in the next parish. "I know," she said to it. "I know. Hold on." She fed them and shut the shelter and went down the wet bank to begin the day properly. She did not let herself look east. 11 miles off, over the top of Barrow Hill, a house with 40 rooms in it stood empty, with its shutters up. The Woolpack at Wenlow Cross was a long, low house of grey stone, with an arch through the middle of it and a yard behind. It had been added to so many times that no 2 floors in it were level. There were 14 beds. There was a parlour for gentry and a kitchen for everybody, a long room over the stables where the market dinner was held on the 2nd Thursday, a still house, a brew house, and a bee bank. There were 300 weight of oats in the loft, and a bill for them in the drawer. Over the door, on a board her grandfather had paid a Draxton man 8 shillings to let her, it said Thomas Westham, licensed to sell ale, beer, wine, and spirituous liquors. Every person who passed through that door in the summer of 1816 was served, warmed, fed, bedded, and got away again by a woman of 23, whose name was on nothing at all. She did not resent it in the mornings. Mornings were too full. She resented it about 4 in the afternoon, generally, when the letters came. The letter that came on the Thursday was from the clerk to the trustees of the Wenlow and Draxton Turnpike, and it was addressed, in a good round hand, to Mr. Thomas Westham, innkeeper, the Woolpack, Wenlow Cross. She stood in the arch and read it with the rain coming off the lead above her in a thin, steady rope. The trustees gave Mr. Westham notice that a new line of road from Draxton to Barrow Hill had been surveyed under the Act. The same would be considered at the general meeting on Monday, the 29th day of September. Any person having an interest might attend and be heard. Any person having an interest. He can be carried in and held up like a saint, said Margaretta Tuckwell from the kitchen door, and he can be heard saying nothing at all. He can make his mark. On a paper that says what? Margaretta had been cook at the Woolpack for 31 years, and had been her mother's friend before that, and she had a face like a walnut, and no patience with paper. Girl, they will not be putting the road 3 miles the other way, because a sick man makes a cross. No. Then what are you standing in the wet for? "Because I have not finished being angry," Anne said, "and I would rather do it out here." Margaretta went back to her pastry. Anne folded the letter along the folds the clerk had made. She put it in the drawer with the oat bill, the ostler's wages, and the 2 years of trust accounts she had asked for in April, and had never been sent. Then she went and drew 9 quarts of ale for the wagoners, who had come in off the 8-mile pull with their boots full of water. She served them exactly as she would have served the Lord Lieutenant. That was the other thing about the Woolpack, and she had it from her mother. One house, Hannah Westham used to say, with her sleeves rolled and her hair coming down. Not one for the gentry, and one for the rest. I have not the strength to keep 2. Mrs. Bewley came on the Saturday, in her gig, with her boy driving. She came about once a fortnight, and always on her way to somewhere else, which was a thing Anne had noticed and never said. The George at Draxton was a bigger house than the Woolpack by 9 beds. It had the excise office, and the assembly, and the trustees' dinner, and Mrs. Camilla Bewley had kept it for 11 years since her husband went into the churchyard. "My dear," she said, "you look tired to death, and I am glad to see it." "Ma'am?" "A tired girl is a girl who is doing the thing properly." Mrs. Bewley came into the kitchen and took the good chair without being asked, which was not rudeness. It was simply how the world was arranged, and she had lived in it longer. "How is your poor father?" "Much the same." "Speech no better?" "No." "They do come back sometimes." Mrs. Bewley drew off her gloves, finger by finger. "There was a man at Rushmore lay 8 months, and then sat up and asked for his hat. Is that your honey?" "Last year's. You will not sell much this year. Nobody will." She turned the jar in her hands and read the paper label, which said in Hannah Westham's writing, "Orchard Bank, 1815. Your mother had a lovely hand. Now, my dear, I am going to be tiresome, because I am fond of you. Michaelmas." "Michaelmas," Anne said. "The bench sits at 11, and the trustees dine at 2, both of them in my long room, so you may be sure I shall hear every word twice." She set the jar down. "You know they must renew your father's license. They renewed it last year. Last year he was on his legs. It was said kindly. Everything Mrs. Bewley said was said kindly. My dear, the magistrates like a house to have a master. It is not sense, and it is not justice. It is 30 years of the same 4 gentlemen at the same table. They have never in their lives licensed a house with nobody in it but a young woman. If any person gives notice of objection, they will hear it. Who would give notice? Somebody who wanted the house." Mrs. Bewley smiled at her. "I am fond of you, Anne. If it comes to that, I would take the house on myself and keep you in it. Housekeeper, £20, and your keep, and no bills to lie awake over. You would sleep till 6 for the first time in your life." There it was. It had taken 11 minutes. "That is very good of you," Anne said. "It is not good of me at all. It is business, and you are worth £20 to any house in this county." She stood and pulled her gloves back on. "Think about it in the wet nights. Kit, we are going." The gig went out under the arch. Margaretta came out of the pantry with a bowl of dripping and stood watching the empty arch as though it had said something to her. £20, she said, "and my keep. She wants your long room for the market dinner, and she wants your 11 shillings off the mail." Margaretta put the bowl down hard. "She's not wicked, girl. That's the worst of her. She's frightened, and frightened people are tidy. They tidy you away. On the Monday, the surveyor came back, with 2 gentlemen and a chainman and a dog, and they dined in the parlour on the mutton she had meant for Thursday. Mr. Bidder was a small, dry man with ink on his second finger, and he was not unkind. That was what Anne remembered afterwards. He said thank you when she brought the wine. He held the door for her when her hands were full, and for 1 hour and 40 minutes he talked across her, over her, through her. He talked about the fall of Barrow Hill, the rise out of Wenlow Bottom, what the hill cost the county in dead horses every winter. When she set down the dish of pears, she said, "Sir, when the trustees consider the line, may a person be heard who is not a trustee." Mr. Bidder looked up at her with real surprise, the way a man looks up when a chair speaks. "Any person having an interest?" he said. "It is in the notice." "And is the interest of a house on the old line an interest?" "Well," he smiled. It was a nice smile, and it went nowhere near her question. "That is a matter for the gentleman. Would you tell your father the pears are very good?" "I will tell him." She went out and shut the door, and stood a moment in the passage with the empty tray against her hip. Then she drew ale for 2 waggoners in the kitchen. They called her Miss Westham, and asked after her father by name, and she served them exactly as she had served the parlour. 1 house. She had not the strength to keep 2. The stranger came that Friday, at the end of the light, on foot. Nobody comes to a coaching inn on foot. That was the first thing. The second thing was the rain, which had been going all day, and had got into the road until the road was a soup, and he had walked 11 or 12 miles in it by the look of him. He stood under the arch and let it run off him. A soldier's greatcoat gone at the cuffs. A pack roped, of the sort that has been carried in a country where nothing may be left behind. A fortnight of beard, and under the beard a brown that England does not give a man. He was tall, and he stood as though standing were a thing he had been taught rather than a thing he did. "Have you a bed?" he said. "I have 1 bed, and it is a bad one." "How bad?" "It is over the arch," Anne said. "The mail comes through at 4, and it comes through under your floor. There is no fireplace worth the name, and the window whistles. I do not let it in August. I would not let it to you now, only there is nothing else in the house, because there is a family in the 2 good rooms, with a broken axle, and a lame horse and a baby. How much? 1 shilling and 6pence, with supper." He set the pack down, and took out a purse, and Anne watched him count. He counted the way she counted, not to see whether he had it, but to see what would be left afterwards. Then he stopped counting, and looked up, and she saw his eyes properly for the first time in the lamplight, a blue with grey behind it, like slate under water. "Pay me in the morning," she said. "Come in out of it." She had said that sentence perhaps 400 times in her life, to drovers and to pedlars, and once to a bishop's coachman. She never afterwards knew why she remembered saying it that night. What she did was what she always did, which was the whole of it. She put him in the kitchen by the fire on the settle where the light was, because a man who has walked 12 miles wet must be got warm before he is got clean. She sent Betsy up with a kettle and a warming pan and a can of hot water. She lit a fire in the arch room in August and stood a screen against the window where the draught came under the sash. She took the boots off him at the door because she was not having that road on her floors, and she found her father's Sunday stockings and did not ask. She fed him after the kitchen was closed. Cold mutton, the end of the raised pie, bread, 2 eggs beaten into hot ale, and honey, because she gave honey to anybody who came in wet. "You will want it in the morning too," she said. Nobody eats enough in this weather. He ate like a man at a table, where the food might be counted, quickly and completely, and without any sound at all. When he had finished, he sat looking at the plate for a moment, and then he said, "That is the 2nd time this year I have been fed by somebody who had no reason to." "I have every reason. You are paying 1 6. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed, and pushed the book across the table to him, with the pen and the standish. "Your name in the book, if you please. The bench likes it kept." He looked at the book a long time. It was a fat brown book with the corners gone. The first 40 pages were in her mother's hand, and the rest were in hers. The date, the name, the road, the beds taken, what was owed and what was paid. It went back 19 years. The pen stopped over the page. She was banking the fire, and she saw it stop, and she saw the shoulders under the bad coat go still, and she thought, "Here it comes. A false name." Well, they were half of them false. The runaway matches, and the debtors, and the men going to see women they should not. And she had long ago stopped minding. He wrote Jonas Hallett, and after it, in the column for the place, of no fixed place. "There," she said. "That is honest, at least." "Is it?" "Half the names in that book are lies, Mr. Hallett. I do not keep it for the names." She shut the ledger and put it on its shelf. "I keep it for the roads. 19 years of what the road was like on what day. There is not a surveyor in England has better, and not one of them has ever asked me." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The almost. "Good night," he said. At 11, a gentleman's man came down and offered her ½ a crown for the arch-room for his master's maid, who did not care to lie in the same passage as a family with a baby. "The room is taken," Anne said. "½ a crown, and I'll not tell you what a fool you are." "The room is taken," she said again, and went to bed at 1, and was on the stairs with the candle at 10 minutes past 4, when the horn came up out of the dark. He was in the yard when the down coach came through at 9:30, standing out of the way by the pump with his hands behind him, and she did not know he was watching her until afterwards. The regulator gave her 4 minutes. In 4 minutes, Munn and the boy took 4 horses out and put 4 in. The hot water, the 2 brandies, the parcel for the Draxton office. All of it stood ready on the ledge inside the arch, where the passengers could reach it without coming down. She gave the coachman his shilling's worth of ale in the pot he liked. She took 8 pence for a pie, handed up to the roof. She told an inside passenger which way the wind would be after Barrow Hill. She lifted a dropped shawl off the wet cobbles and got it up to its owner before the wheel turned. The coach went. The yard was empty. It had rained the whole time, and she had not once put a hand to her hair. "How many of those in a day?" he said. 4. 2 down, 2 up. 5 on a Thursday if the Berry coach runs. She was wiping the ledge. "The mail does not count. The mail is 4 minutes at night, and worse, because everything must be laid overnight." "Who taught you to lay it overnight?" "My mother." Anne looked round at him. He had shaved. Without the beard, he was younger than she had thought, and harder to place, and the sunburn stopped in a clean line where a hat had been. "Did you want your bill, Mr. Hallett?" "I want the room for a week." "The room is bad." "The room is dry, and nobody in it knows me." He said that quite simply, as a man states a term of business, and then seemed to hear it. "I have walking to do in this country, and I would rather do it from one place." "Then it is 7 shillings the week, with your dinner, and the arch is yours." She took out the book, turned it to the page, and wrote 1 week beside his name. Then the pen went on, and made the note she always made. 19 years of the road had taught her that a house is remembered by what it writes down. Under the column for the road, she wrote, "Draxton Road bad, 4 in hand, no gravel laid since June." "What is that?" he said. "The state of the road, that day, by the men who came in on it. The trust has never had it off me." She blotted it. "They do not ask." "They will." "They will not." She shut the book. "Have you any dry stockings of your own, or shall I keep my father's on you till Thursday?" He looked down at the stockings. Then he laughed once, on an outward breath, as though the machinery for it had been in store and wanted oiling, and the laugh startled Betsy so much in the passage that she dropped a spoon. "Keep them on me," he said. That was the 16th of August. He stayed a week, and then another, and by the end of the month, nobody in the house said Mr. Hallett any more. They said him, or the soldier, or the man in the arch, and Margaretta said other things. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Here is what he did in those first 2 weeks, which Anne wrote down nowhere and remembered all her life. He mended the pump. It had been drawing air since Whitsun. She had asked the Draxton man to come 3 times, and he had not come, because a bill from a house with a sick man in it is a bill that may sit. The soldier took the handle off. He cut a new leather with her father's old razor and a candle end, put it back, and asked her to fill a bucket to see whether he had done it right. He rehung the stable door that had dropped and been dragged over the same 6 inches of cobble for 2 years, until the cobble had a groove in it like the lip of a jug. He carried water. Nobody had ever carried water for her in her life. Munn was 68. The boy was 12. Betsy had her own work. Water in that house came up out of the yard, 4 buckets at a time, and the 3rd and 4th were the ones that put the ache in her shoulder. On the 4th morning, she came out, and the coppers were full. She stood looking at them, with a kind of anger she could not find the top of. He did not talk. That was the strangest thing, and in the end, the restful thing. He answered when he was spoken to, and did not answer more than the question. He sat in the corner of the kitchen settle in the evenings, where the light from the fire fell on his hands and not his face, and he listened. He listened to the waggoners on the price of oats, and to Betsy on her sister's baby, and to Margaretta abusing the butcher at Draxton. None of them ever afterwards said he had been dull company, though he said almost nothing at all. Twice she came into the kitchen at night and found him standing up in the dark by the window, with a chair pushed back behind him. Both times he said, "The pump," or "I thought I heard the gate." Both times she knew it was neither of those things. "He's never a labouring man?" Margaretta said, over the pastry on the 1st of September. "No." "You know that, then?" "His boots were made for him," Anne said. "You do not have boots made, and then walk 12 mile in the rain to a house where the beds are 1 and 6. and his hands are hard in the wrong places. And he holds a knife like the parson. Margaretta thumped the dough over. And when the London paper come in on Tuesday, he read it standing up in the passage where nobody could see his face, and put it back folded the way it come. He is somebody's son who has come down in the world. Half the men on this road are. He's not come down. He's stepped off. Margaretta looked at her with her small black eyes. There's a difference, girl, and you know it as well as I do, and you have not asked him one question in a fortnight. He is paying 7 shillings a week. Ah, said Margaretta, 7 shillings. Well, that will do it. Munn's verdict was shorter, and Munn's verdict in that yard was law. She asked him on the Saturday whether he minded the lodger about the stables. The old man went on strapping the harness. He come up on the near side of that grey without being told, miss. That was the whole of the character reference. It was a better one than a bishop's. The boy asked outright, which children do. Was you a soldier, mister? I was. Was you at the battle? I was at a battle. Was you frightened? There was a pause in the yard. Anne, in the doorway with the eggs, stopped. I was so frightened, the man said, that I have not yet come home. The boy took this as a joke, being 12, and laughed, and went for the currycomb. The man went on, picking a stone out of a hoof with his head down. Anne went in and put the eggs in the bowl, and did not trust her hands with them for a moment. He found the bees on the 4th of September at 5:10 in the morning, which was the one part of the day that had ever belonged to her alone. She had the smoke pot going, and her sleeves turned back, and a length of old muslin over her hat, and she was lifting the second skep off its board to feel the weight of it. He came up the wet bank without hurrying, and stopped 4 feet off, which was exactly the right distance, and she liked him for it before she had decided to. Stand out of the line of the door, she said, and they will not mind you. How much are you feeding them? 2 quarts of syrup a week to the weak ones, and that is money out of the house every Saturday. She set the skep down and straightened. There will be no honey worth the name this year. You will have heard the men say it in the kitchen. There was no sun on the blossom in May, and no dry day in June, and a bee cannot work in rain. They have been sitting in there since Whitsun, eating what they made last year, and looking at the weather like the rest of us. How many are dead? None yet. 2 are queenless, and I shall have to put them together before the cold, and that means choosing which lot loses its home. She said it flatly, because it was flat. 9 hives. My mother had 6. 3 of mine have stores enough to winter without me, and 6 have not. He stood and watched the entrance of the nearest one, where the guards were walking up and down on the board in the grey light, like men on a quay. They know you, he said. They know the smoke, and they know the hour, and they know that when I come, there is generally something in it for them. That is not love, Mr. Hallett. It is trade, and it is more than most of us get. She began to tie the muslin back off her face. Though I will tell you a thing about bees that is not trade, and you may laugh at it if you like. I shall not laugh. In this county you tell them. She said it to the hive, not to him. When there is a death in the house, you go out to the bees, and you knock on the skep, and you tell them plainly who has died. My grandmother put crepe on the boards, and turned them round to face the door. If you do not tell them, they take it badly. They go off. or they sulk and die in the spring, and everybody says afterwards that of course they were never told. The morning went on with its small noises. Somewhere below, in the yard, Munn dropped a bucket and swore at it. "Do you believe it?" he said at last. "I believe I did it," Anne said. "My mother died in the November of the year 12, of a thing in her chest, on a Tuesday. I went out at 6 in the morning, before they came to lay her out, because I was 19, and I wanted a thing to do with my hands. I knocked on all 6 of the skeps, and I told them Hannah Westham was dead. And then I could go in and do the rest of it." She picked up the smoke pot. "So you may call it what you like. It is the only funeral I have ever been any good at." She turned round to say something else, something ordinary about breakfast, and he was not looking at the hives at all. He was looking at nothing, and his face had gone as still and shut as a house with the blinds down, and his hand on the corner post of the bee shelter had closed until the knuckles showed white. "Mr. Hallett, your syrup wants to be thinner," he said. "In this weather, thinner and warmer." And he went down the bank away from her, fast, the way a man leaves a room where somebody has begun to sing. He sat that night in the arch room with the candle out and the window up, and he did the accounting he had done every night for a fortnight. The room was 7 feet by 11. The mail came through under his floor at 10 minutes past 4 and shook the boards, and he had come to wait for it. He had slept in worse places and had done it for 6 years. A chapel at Badajoz with the roof gone, a ditch above the Douro, a barn at Mont Saint-Jean with the rain coming through and 40 men breathing. On the sill in front of him lay the whole of his estate, as far as he was at present willing to own it. A silver watch with a dent in the case stopped at 4 in the afternoon on the 18th of June in the year 15. He had never had it mended. A stopped watch is at least honest. A folded paper with an address on it. Mrs. Hallett, at the sign of the Wagon, Nettleby, in Lincolnshire. £11 and some shillings in a purse, being the arrears of pay owing to Sergeant Jonas Hallett of the Light Company, paid out to his officer because the man had nobody at the depot to claim it. 14 months that paper had been folded in his coat. 14 months, 3 weeks, and a day. "Tell her I sent it," Hallett had said in the barn, with the surgeon's man holding a light. "Not that they took it off me after. She'll want to think I sent it." He had said, "I will." He had said it in the voice officers use, which is a voice that promises the impossible cheaply. Then he had been 11 months in France with an army that had nothing to do. Then a letter had come from a man of business he had never met, addressed to a title that had never in his life been his. It had all gone into the same bag together. The dead sergeant, the dead brother, the dead father, the £11, the 40 rooms. Here was the plain shape of it. His father, the 4th Duke, had died in the January of the year 14, in his own bed, disappointed. His brother Crispin had died in the February of this year, of a chill taken out with hounds, and made nothing of for 9 days. Inigo had been a lieutenant with 200 a year of his own, and no expectation whatever, which is the freest thing an Englishman can be. He had learned that he was the 5th Duke of Thornhold from a folded newspaper in a coffee room in Brussels, 7 weeks after the fact, standing up in his boots among strangers. He had read it twice. Then he had gone out into the street and walked until it was dark. What he had felt and had been ashamed of, and had not stopped feeling since, was not grief. It was the sensation of a hand laid on the back of his neck. At Ramsgate, the packet's clerk had wanted a name for his book. There had been a chaise waiting on the quay, with a footman beside it, looking at every face, sent by an agent who was doing his duty perfectly. Inigo had stood with the pen in his hand and understood one thing clearly. If he wrote his own name, he would be in that chaise in 4 minutes, and would be, from that hour, a thing that was arranged. So he wrote the name of the best man he had ever known, who had no further use for it. It was not a plan. That was what he could not have explained to anybody, least of all to her. A plan would have been a kinder thing. It was a postponement, renewed daily, the way a man puts off a letter until the not writing of it becomes the whole of his correspondence. He had ridden as far as the lodge gates at Ironmore in the last week of July, in the rain. Through the ironwork, he had looked at a house with every shutter closed and grass in the sweep. A lodge-keeper's wife had come out and asked him his business. He had said, "Nothing," and turned the horse. 11 miles. There were 40 letters waiting for him at the Draxton post office, in a bundle with a string round it, addressed to His Grace. He had not sent for them. And now there was this house, with its 4 minutes, its pump, its 9 hives, its brown book, and a woman of 23 in it, who fed a stranger after the kitchen was shut and asked him nothing at all. You go out and you knock, and you tell them plainly who has died. He put the watch and the paper back in his coat, and lay down in his clothes, and waited for the mail to come through under the floor. The pegs went in on the 9th. She saw them from the yard. 3 of them along the top of her own bank behind the bee shelter, whitewashed at the tip, and a 4th in the orchard hedge. Mr. Bidder was at the far end of the field with his level, and the chainman was coming down the line with the arrows. Anne went up the bank with her apron still on. "Mr. Bidder, those are on our ground." "Good morning, Miss Westham. They are only marks. Nothing is done by a mark. That is the bee bank. There is a shelter and 9 hives on it, and a well-head at the bottom of it. I do not doubt it." He wrote something in his book with the pencil that was tied to it. "The line, as I have set it out, crosses that corner. Whether it stays where I have set it is not my affair, and I would not have you lie awake over a peg. Whose affair is it?" "The trustees, at the general meeting." "And what happens to the corner of a field that a road goes through?" Mr. Bidder looked at her, over the top of his level, with an expression she had seen all her life on the faces of men who are not being unkind. "There is a form for it," he said. "It is all quite regular, and it is not a thing I can explain standing in the wet. Your father will have had the notice." "My father has had the notice." "Then he has it," said Mr. Bidder, comfortably, and bent to his level again. She stood there for a moment. Then she went down the bank, past the man in the bad coat, who was leaning on the orchard gate with a bill hook in his hand. She did not stop. She was not able to speak just then to anybody at all. He watched her go. Then he set the bill hook against the gate and walked up the line to where the chainman was pulling arrows out of the grass. He stood about with him for 5 or 6 minutes, in the manner of a labouring man with nothing to do, and came down again. He found her in the still house, with her hands in the sink. "3 things," he said. "They cannot take a rod of that bank without an award. and the award is made at the meeting, and it must be entered, and it must say what is paid. The line is not settled. There is a second line, over Ludbrooks, that bidder thinks better and cannot get the trustees to look at, because one of them owns the field. And the notice you have had is not a courtesy. It is the trust telling you, in writing, that you have a right to stand up in that room on the 29th and be heard. Anne turned round, with the water running off her wrists. An award, she said. An award. And how does a lodger at 7 shillings a week come to know the word? There was a silence in the still house. The copper ticked. Outside, in the yard, the boy was whistling something with the tune slightly wrong. "I have sat in rooms where it was used," he said. The letter from the magistrate's clerk came on the 11th, and it was 2 lines long, and it did more damage than the trusts had done. Mr. Pettit begged to remind Mr. Thomas Westham that the general licensing meeting for the division would be held at the George Inn, Draxton, on Monday the 29th of September at 11 o'clock, and that the licensee was required to attend in person. In person. Anne read it standing up in the arch, in her second-best gown, because she had been about to go and take the money from the parlour. Then she went in and sat down on the corner of her father's bed and read it to him, all of it, in a level voice. She had promised herself in March that nothing would be kept from him in that house. His right hand turned over on the counterpane. That meant, "Give it to me." He held it a long time. He read very slowly now. The words came in and took their time. She watched his eyes go along the 2 lines twice, and then along the words in person a 3rd time, and then his hand came down flat on the paper. "They will have to hear me," she said. "There is no other person to send." His hand pressed down on the paper twice, hard. "I know," she said. "I know it is not the same. Father, I am going to write a memorial. I shall ask them to put the license in my name, and I shall ask them at the same sitting, so there is no day between when this house has no license at all. And I shall ask Mr. Pettit for the form of words, and I shall pay him his 6 shillings for it, because he is the one man in Draxton who will sell me the truth by the sheet." The brown eyes came up and looked at her. There was something in them she could not read for a moment. Then she could. She had to get up and go to the window and be busy with the curtain. He had wanted a son for 30 years. He had said so, in front of her, at his own table, more than once, in the years when saying a thing like that was only weather. Now he lay in his own kitchen bedroom, with half of himself gone, and watched his daughter keep his house alive by main strength. He could not say the sentence that would have paid her for it. She knew perfectly well that he was trying to. "Do not," she said to the curtain. "I have too much to do today." She wrote the memorial that night, and copied it fair on the Sunday, and on the Monday her father made his cross at the foot of it with his right hand, and she held the paper steady for him. The cross took him 11 seconds. She counted them the way she counted the mail. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Lady Winnell came through on the 17th, with a broken trace, and a footman on foot behind, and stopped an hour and 10 minutes in the Woolpack parlour. It was nothing. That was the whole of it afterwards. It was nothing. A yellow chaise in the yard with a coronet the size of a shilling on the door. A lady of about 26, in a bronze pelisse, who came in out of the rain and said, How very kind. Thank you, no. I shall not take off my bonnet. 2 cups of tea. Gone by 4. Anne served her. Munn and the boy took the trace off to be stitched at Wenlow Forge. And the man from the arch room had been splitting kindling by the wood house. He went out and stood at the leaders' heads for as long as it took, with his hat down and the rain coming off the brim of it. He held the horses of a woman he had once been going to marry, while she waited in a room 11 feet away. Anne did not know that then. What she knew was the shape of the hour, and the shape of it was strange. She knew that Lady Winnell asked, pleasantly, whether the house was still kept by Westham. Because my father used to change here in the old days, and there was a Westham who did something clever with a hamper. She knew that the lady looked directly out of the window into the yard, twice straight at the back of the man holding her own horses, and saw a servant, and looked away. She knew she was left a shilling on the tray, which was generous, and that the lady's maid said the roads in this county were a disgrace, and she pitied any creature who had to live in it. And she knew that when the chaise had gone, she went out to call the man in to his dinner. He was still standing where the horses had been, in the middle of the wet yard, with the axe in his hand and his hat off. He looked, for about 2 seconds, exactly like a man who has been struck in the face and is deciding not to fall. Then he put his hat on. "You knew that, lady?" Anne said. "I did." "Well," she said. She had 100 things to do. She could feel them stacked up behind her like coaches at a turnpike, and instead of doing one of them, she stood there in the rain, with her arms folded into her shawl. "Did she know you?" "No." "Because of the coat?" "Because of the coat," he said, "and because she never did, particularly." He looked at the axe, as though he had just noticed it. Her name was Susanna. Her father had 4 daughters and a mortgage. I was a younger son, with 200 a year, and orders for Portugal. She was to wait. She waited 2 years and 4 months, which was longer than she was asked to, and longer than most would. Then she married a man with 11,000 a year, who was in the room. He set the axe against the wood house wall. She was right, Miss Westham. That is the part people never allow. She was quite right, and I have never once been able to work out what I would have had her do instead. "You might have been killed," Anne said. "Then she would have been 2 years a widow before she was a wife, and had nothing." "Yes. Or you might have come home in the year 12 with a hole in you and no legs, and 200 a year." "Yes." "And instead you came home whole in the year 16, and she has 11,000 a year, and a coronet on her door." Anne pulled her shawl straight. "It is a great pity, but it is not a wrong. There is only one thing in it that I would mind." "What is that?" "That she looked out of my window twice, straight at you," Anne said, "and never saw you at all. I should mind that until I died." She went in to see to the dinner. He stood in the yard a while longer. When he came in, his face had changed in a way she did not understand, until much later. He ate what was put in front of him, and said nothing. About 8 o'clock that evening, he asked her, out of a clear silence, whether she meant to take the honey that week. They took it on the 20th at dusk, and that was the evening the gentleman laughed at her. 2 of them waiting for the up-coach, with a bottle of the good port in them. A Mr. Standen, who dealt in wool, and a friend. They came out to the bank with their glasses in their hands, because Betsy had told them the honey was being taken. And it was something to see. What they saw was this. Anne had the 2 weak skeps to unite, and the crop to take off the 3 strong ones. She meant to do it as her mother had done it, and her grandmother before that, which was not the way it was done in that parish. In that parish, in September, you dug a pit, put a brimstone match in it, and set the hive over the smoke. In 20 minutes, you had all the honey and a peck of dead bees. Everybody said what a pity it was, and did it again the next year. She drove hers instead. It is a slow, exact, unhurried business. You turn the full skep up. You set the empty one mouth to mouth above it. You pin a cloth round the join, and then you rap the sides steadily with your knuckles, and the bees walk up. They walk up out of the dark into the dark, with their queen among them, and they take 3/4 of an hour to do it. At the end, you have a hive of living bees in the new skep, and the combs bare in the old one. 3/4 of an hour, said Mr. Standen, and the brimstone is 20 minutes. It is, Anne said. She did not stop rapping. So is burning a house down. His friend laughed. Mr. Standen did not, quite. My good girl, they are bees. They are 30,000 bees who worked all summer in the worst year in living memory, and made me 4 pounds of honey, she said. And they are going to be alive in March. And Mr. Standen, you are standing in the flight line. He moved. It was not dignified. They went in soon after and told the story in the parlour as a very good joke. The bee woman at the wool-pack and her 3/4 of an hour. The parlour laughed. Anne heard it through the wall and went on with the 4th skep. She was not alone by then. He had come up the bank in the last of the light and taken the sheet, the pins, the 6-penny lantern, without being asked. For the next hour and a half, he was exactly what she needed, and had never once had. A second pair of hands that did not need telling twice. He held the join. He held the lantern low and behind, so the light did not draw them. When she said, "Steady," he was steady. Once the cloth slipped, and 40 of them came up over his bare wrist, and he did not move his arm at all. Afterwards she took 2 stings out of the back of his hand with a knife blade. He sat and let her do it, and looked at the top of her bent head. "Why do you keep 9 hives?" he said. "You said yourself there is no money in it this year." "Because there is money in it most years, and because the still house pays. Mead, and the honey vinegar, and the wax for the church candles." She got the 2nd sting out. "And because they were my mother's." "That is the true one." "That is the true one," she agreed, and pressed her thumb over the place, and said, without any weight on it at all, "Thank you, Jonas." His hand went still under hers. She thought it was the pain, and let go of it, and said sorry, and got up to put the knife away. On the night of the 23rd, she woke at 2 in the morning, and there was a light on the bank. She lay and looked at the ceiling for a minute. There was nothing in that shelter worth stealing, except 4 pounds of honey and a straw skep, and a thief with a lantern is a fool, and she knew perfectly well who it was. She went up in her cloak, with her hair down her back, and the wet grass took the hem of it. The 6-penny lantern stood on the board at the end of the row. He was sitting on the ground beside it. "You will make them cross," she said. "I am 4 feet off and out of the line of the door." "So you are." She sat down on the corner of the board, because her legs had done 19 hours. The night was cold, and clearing at last. There were stars over Barrow Hill for the first time in a month. Well, does it have to be the same day? What? The telling. He was looking at the Skeps, not at her. You said your mother died on a Tuesday, and you went out at 6 in the morning. Does it have to be the same day, or is there some period allowed? Anne pulled her cloak round her feet and thought about it properly, because he had asked it properly. My grandmother would have said the same day, she said. My mother would have said, as soon as you are able, and my mother was the sensible one. I never heard of any bee in England that would not forgive a man for being late, only for not coming. 14 months, he said. Then you are 14 months late, said Anne, and they are still here. He got up. He did it stiffly, the way he did everything at the end of a day. He stood in front of the third skep with his hands at his sides, like a man on parade. Anne looked at the grass, and not at him, because there are things you do not watch. He knocked on the straw with his knuckles. Twice, plainly, the way she had shown him without meaning to. There was a man died in the January of the year 14, he said, in his own bed, in his own house, disappointed in everything he had, and I did not much like him. I have found since that I cannot stop missing him, which was not in the arrangement at all. The bees made the sound a hive makes at night, which is the sound of a house with everybody home. His son died in the February of this year, he said. Of a chill got out with hounds, and made nothing of for 9 days. He was 34. He wrote me 11 letters in 6 years, and I answered 4. I did not know that he was dead for 7 weeks. When I did know it, I was standing up in a coffee room among strangers with a newspaper in my hand. He knocked again. And there was a man died in a barn in Belgium, he said, at about 4 in the afternoon, on the 18th of June, in the year 15. He had his mother's ring on a string round his neck, and £11 owing to him. And he asked me one thing. I have his watch in my coat. I have his money in my purse. His mother has had neither of them for 14 months. Silence. Away down the hill, a dog barked twice at nothing. That is all, he said. I am sorry to be so long about it. Anne sat on the board, with her hands inside her cloak. The custom wants names, she said at last. You knock, and you say who. It is the whole of the custom. A hive is not told anything by a man saying there was a man. I know it. Then say them. Not yet, he said. She could have got up then. She thought about it afterwards for years. She could have stood up on that wet bank at 2 in the morning and said, No, tonight. Say them or go. The whole of the rest of her life would have arrived by a different road. What she did was put her hand flat on the top of the skep, beside his, and leave it there. Then they will have to make do, she said. They are used to it. Half the county tells them nothing at all. They stayed up there perhaps 10 minutes more, without saying anything worth writing down. The stars went on over Barrow Hill. At the bottom of the bank, as they came down, he stopped with the lantern in his hand. Before the 29th, he said, there is a thing I must tell you, and you will not like it, and I would rather do it in daylight when you have hands to spare. Then Sunday, Anne said. After church, before the up-coach. I shall have an hour. Sunday. Is it a wife? She said. She did not know she was going to say it. No. Is it the law? No. Then it will keep till Sunday, she said. And I am going to bed. It did not keep till Sunday. At 6 on the Saturday morning, with the mist lying in the hollow, and the kitchen fire just caught, 4 horses came into the yard. Anne was in the arch with the big water can. She heard them come off the road, and heard the wheels of something light behind them. She thought, in the way one thinks at 6 in the morning, that it was a party for the Draxton market wanting breakfast early, and that there was no ham cut. Then she came out under the arch. 2 grooms in dark green with their hats off, a led horse, a man in a good travelling coat getting down from a gig with a leather case under his arm. He was about 50, grey, tidy, and so tired that his face had gone the colour of the mist. He did not look at her. He looked past her, up the yard, at the man in the bad coat, who had come out of the stable with a bridle over his shoulder, and had stopped dead. The man in the good coat took his hat off. "Your Grace," he said. The whole yard heard it. Betsy heard it in the doorway with the milk. Munn heard it at the pump. The boy heard it, sitting on the mounting block with a curry comb in his hand, and his mouth coming open. Margaretta heard it from the kitchen, and came out with flour to the elbow, and stood in the door. And under the arch, at exactly that moment, because the world arranges these things, Mrs. Bewley's gig came through on its way to Draxton Market, and stopped, because the yard was full. Anne stood in the middle of it, with the water can in both hands. "Your Grace," said the tidy man again, "I have been in every house between Ramsgate and this one. Tolladine, sir. Your brother's agent. Your agent." Nobody moved. The mist went on, lying in the hollow. "Mr. Tolladine," said the man in the bad coat. "Sir." "You have found me at breakfast time in a house where I owe money," he said, "and I would be obliged if you would say nothing else for 1 minute." And then he turned round in the middle of that yard. In front of the grooms, the gig, the milk, the flour, Mrs. Bewley leaning forward in her seat, with her mouth slightly open. He looked at Anne. "Miss Westham," he said. Anne set the water can down on the cobbles, carefully, so as not to slop it, because a can of water is a can of water, and somebody would have had to fetch it again. Then she curtsied to him. Not a small one. The full one, the one her mother had taught her for bishops and lords lieutenant, low and level and correct, holding it a second longer than was strictly required. "Your Grace," she said. It was the cruelest thing she ever did to anybody in her life, and she knew it while she was doing it, and she did it anyway. Margaretta cleared the kitchen the way she cleared a room when there was thunder coming. Fast, without explaining, taking Betsy by the arm. Mr. Tolladine was put in the parlour with coffee, which he did not drink. They stood at either end of the long table with the bread trough between them. "Ask me," he said. "I have nothing to ask. It is all answered." Anne had her hands folded in front of her, which was what she did instead of shaking. "You are the Duke of Thornhold. Your brother died in February. You are the trustee that Mr. Bidder cannot get to look at his second line, because you have not looked at anything, because you have been in my archroom eating my mutton for 6 weeks. 5. She took a breath. You are the chairman of that trust. Are you not? By the Act, the seat is my brother's, and mine now. Yes. Then here is the only thing I want to know." Her voice was not loud. It never was. That was the trouble with her. People were always surprised afterwards. "On the 9th of this month, I stood in the wet on my own bank, and asked Mr. Bidder a plain question about my own field, and he answered me the way a man answers a chair. And you stood at that gate with a bill hook in your hand and watched him do it. Yes. And then you went and got the answer off a chainman for me. You brought it down to the still house and gave it to me in 3 parts, like a man feeding a bird. She heard her own voice go and stopped it. You could have said 1 sentence, not to the trust, to me, in this kitchen, any night for 5 weeks. Yes. Why did you not? Because you would have stopped. He said it quietly, and it was the only defense he made, and it was so exactly true that it took the ground out from under her. You would have begun to manage me, Miss Westham. You could not have helped it. There would have been the good sheets on the bed, the parlour fire lit, my dinner at a separate hour, and you would have started to watch my face when you spoke, the way this whole county watches my face now. I had 6 weeks in England, in which nobody did that. I have been better used in this house than I have been used in any house in my life, and I knew what it was worth, and I did not correct you because I wanted to stay. Do not, Anne said, dress it up as a compliment to me. It is not a compliment. It is what I did. He put his hands on the back of the chair in front of him. Ask me the other thing. What other thing? The name. And there it was, and she had been keeping it in a covered dish, because she could not lift the lid off it in front of anybody. Whose is it? She said. Sergeant Jonas Hallett's. Light Company. He was my sergeant for 4 years. Spain, France, and the last of it. He died in the barn I told your bees about. His mother lives at Nettleby in Lincolnshire, and does not know how he was buried, or when, or whether. He said it steadily. I wrote his name at Ramsgate because I could not write my own. It was not a jest. There has not been 1 minute of it that was a jest. I called you by it, Anne said. I know. On Friday night, in the still house, over your hand. Her eyes had gone, and she let them, standing up, which was not like her at all. You had 2 stings in you, and I said, thank you, Jonas. You sat there and let me put a dead man's name on you. And I thought... She stopped. I do not know what I thought. Something foolish, that you had let me use it because we had come to that. We had come to that. We had come to nothing at all. She wiped her face with the flat of her hand, once like a child, and put her hands back in front of her. Your horse is fed. Munn has had him out since 6. Miss Westham, the award and the license. The bench sits on Monday, and I can... No? It came out of her like a door shutting. That is the last of it, and if you say the rest of that sentence, I shall never be able to be in a room with you again. Whatever happens in that room on Monday, it will happen to a house that a woman keeps, or it will not happen at all. I will not have this house saved by a gentleman remembering that he liked his supper here. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. You are quite right. I beg your pardon. Then he took his hat off the peg, which was still the bad hat. He went out through the kitchen door into the yard, where his own grooms were standing about in dark green. Anne turned round and picked up the breadcloth and folded it 3 times. She did not watch him ride away. Mrs. Bewley's notice of objection was delivered at 4 that afternoon by her son Kit, who could not look at Anne while he handed it over. It was on Mr. Pettitt's paper and correctly drawn. Notice was given that objection would be made to the renewal of the license of the Woolpack at Wenlow Cross. The grounds were 3. that the licensee was by reason of infirmity incapable of keeping order in his house, that the house was in fact conducted by a young unmarried woman without a master, and that other matters touching the conduct of the house would be laid before the justices. Other matters, said Margaretta, reading it over her shoulder. That's the arch-room, that is. That is a duke 5 weeks in the arch-room, and you carrying his supper up the stairs yourself. It will be in every kitchen between here and Draxton by Sunday dinner, and it is not one word of it a lie. No, Anne said. It is not one word of it a lie. Then what will you do? What I was going to do on the 11th of September, she said, and have been doing every night since, while everybody in this house thought I was doing the books. 11 miles east, that Saturday, the shutters came off the front of Ironmore. He walked through 40 rooms with Tolladine behind him, carrying a lamp, and every chair in the house wore a sheet, and the sheets had been on so long they had taken the shape of what was under them. In his brother's dressing room, there were 7 letters from a lieutenant in Spain, kept in a japanned box, the 4 that had been answered, and the 3 that had not. His father's disappointment was in the library, in the form of a book of sermons with a marker in it. It had all been waiting for him, quite patiently, exactly as long as he had been afraid it would. He sat up that night with the Trust's minute book and the surveyor's plans, and did the arithmetic that ought to have been done in July, and it came out against her. The new cut was right. That was the whole ugliness of it. 3 miles shorter, no Wenlow Bottom, no Barrow Hill for a loaded wagon in February, 12 parishes better off, and every carrier in the county saving a day. The second line, Bidder's line, was better still by a trifle. It crossed the field of the trustee, who had spoken loudest for the first. That was a thing which could be said out loud in a room on Monday, and would cost that gentleman a bad quarter of an hour. But it did not save the Woolpack. Nothing on paper saved the Woolpack. Roads are not bent 11 miles to pay a private debt, and a man who bent one would deserve everything he got. Monday was the 29th. That left him 1 day, and 80 miles of it was road. He went on the Sunday, hard, changing twice. At 9 o'clock that night, he stood at the door of a small house at the sign of the wagon at Nettleby, with a silver watch and £11 in his hand. In front of him was a woman of 60 in a black cap, who had lost 3 sons and had 1 left. He sent it, he said. He asked me to say so. She looked at the watch for a long time. She did not ask the question he had been afraid of for 14 months, which was why so late. She asked the other one. Was there anybody by him? I was. All the way. To the end of it. Mrs. Hallett nodded slowly and put the watch in her apron pocket and said, Then come in out of the door, sir. You're letting the fire out. He told her, before he left, what he had done with her son's name. He told it plainly, standing up, the way he had been taught to tell a thing at the end of September by a woman on a wet bank. 6 weeks, she said. 5 and apart. Mrs. Hallett thought about it. Then she gave a short laugh, with no bitterness in it at all, which he remembered until he died. Well, she said. He'd have liked that. He was never nobody's servant, that boy. He only took the wages. She smoothed the apron over the watch. Say it once more for me, sir. His name, out loud. He said it. She listened to it the way you listen to a bell. He rode all night, and came into Draxton at 9:30 on the Monday morning with his coat wet through, and there were 70 people in the yard of the George. The long room at the George was the room they held the assemblies in, and it smelled of last winter's candles. 5 gentlemen sat along a table on a low platform with the chairman in the middle. Mr. Pettit sat below them with his list, and behind the list stood 2 hours of other people's houses. Anne had come in at 10 with Margaretta, and a bundle under her arm tied in a check cloth. She had her second-best gown on and her mother's shawl, and she had not slept since Thursday. Her father had made her promise to stand where the bench could see her whole face. She stood there. There were 9 houses on the list before the Woolpack. She listened to every one of them. That was the only part of the morning she was proud of afterwards. "The Woolpack at Wenlow Cross," said Mr. Pettit at 12:20. "Licensee Thomas Westham. Renewal sought, and a memorial with it. There is also notice of objection." "Who appears for the licensee?" said the chairman. "I do, sir," Anne said. "There is no other person to send." Mrs. Bewley's case was put in 11 minutes, and it was not a wicked case. It was true. A man who cannot lift his own arm cannot keep order in a taproom. A house with no master is a house that gentlemen talk about. And there had been a stranger 5 weeks in the arch-room, with his dinner carried up by the licensee's daughter, and half the parish would swear to it, because half the parish had seen it. "Miss Westham," said the chairman, in the voice men use when they have already decided and are being kind about it. "Have you anything to say to that?" "3 things, sir." "Say them." "The first is that the house has been kept these 7 months by me, and I will not pretend otherwise to save myself. I do the cellar, and the books, and the beds, and the coach. I turned out 2 wagoners in June, and neither of them came back. If the bench will send a man to the Woolpack on any night it pleases, at any hour it pleases, he will find the taproom quiet, and the yard swept, and my father's license honoured to the letter." "And the second?" "The second is my memorial. I ask that the license be put in my own name. Not my father's, and not any husband's. If a woman is keeping the house, let the paper say so, and then the bench has somebody to punish when it goes wrong." Somebody at the back laughed once, and stopped. "The third," said Anne, and untied the check cloth. It was the brown book, and 19 years of it. She laid it on the clerk's table, and opened it at the 9th of September. Beside it, she laid 11 sheets in her own fair hand, copied out every night since that day, while everybody in her house believed she was doing the books. "This is the state of the Draxton Road," she said, "written down on the day, by the men who came in on it, for 19 years. Every flood in Wenlow Bottom, every wagon stuck at the foot of Barrow Hill, with the date and the number of horses put to it. The Trust has never once asked me for it. It is asked for now, or it is not, but it exists, and it is the only 19 years of that road anybody has." Mr. Bidder had come in at the back of the room to hear his own line spoken of. He came up the room fast, and stood at the clerk's table, and turned the sheets over, and his face did a thing that surveyors' faces do not generally do in public. "Sir," he said to the chairman, "I have been asking for this since July." That was all it took, and it took no gentleman's favour at all. The Trust met in the same room at 3. On the strength of 11 sheets of a woman's handwriting, the second line was carried over Ludbrooke's ground, 3 miles shorter and out of the bottom, and the pegs came out of the B-Bank on the Wednesday. One trustee declared an interest in the matter, and withdrew before the vote, and did not speak, and was not thanked for it, which was correct. But that was the afternoon. At 12:30, there was still the archroom. "There is the further matter," said Mr. Pettit, "of the conduct of the house." "Sir," said Anne, "I will answer it before it is asked. A man came to my door on foot in the rain on the 15th of August, and I had no bed but the archroom, and I let it to him at 7 shillings the week with his dinner. He carried my water and mended my pump. He ate in my kitchen with my people. I carried his supper up myself on the nights the girl was gone home, and I would do it again tomorrow for any man who paid me 7 shillings and gave me no trouble. If that loses me the license, then the bench had better tell every widow in this division which of her lodgers she may feed." The chairman looked past her at the back of the room. "Your Grace," he said, "you have been standing there half an hour." "I have. Do you wish to be heard?" "I ask leave to be heard as a witness, sir, not as anything else." He came up the room in a coat that fitted him, which Anne minded more than she expected to, and he did not look at her once, which she understood afterwards was the whole of his courtesy that day. "The man in the archroom was myself," he said. "I put a false name in that woman's register on the 15th of August. It was the name of Sergeant Jonas Hallett of the Light Company, who died in Belgium in my hearing, and I had no right to it, and I have begged his mother's pardon for it on Sunday night at Nettleby. Miss Westham did not know who I was until Saturday morning. Nobody in that house knew. I let them all go on, not knowing, for 5 weeks, because I was better used there than I have ever been used anywhere, and I did not wish to lose it." The room was very quiet. "That is the whole of the conduct of the house," he said. "A woman fed a stranger after her kitchen was shut, and charged him 7 shillings. If there is fault in the archroom, it is mine, entirely, and it is not the kind the bench can reach. I say nothing about the license. It is not mine to say anything about, and if I did, the license would be worth less than the paper." Then he went back down the room and stood against the wall by the door. They granted it at 10 minutes to 1, in her own name, in the 3rd year of a woman keeping that house alone. Anne Westham, licensed to sell ale, beer, cider, and spirituous liquors, at the Woolpack at Wenlow Cross. Mrs. Bewley did not stay to hear the last of the list. She was in the passage getting her cloak when Anne came out, and she turned round with her chin up, being a woman who had never in her life given anybody the pleasure of seeing her go quietly. 11 years ago, she said, I asked this bench for the Griffin in my own name. My husband was 6 weeks dead, and I had kept that house for 9 years while he drank in it. They put it in Kit's name. He was 19 and could not count a barrel. Her mouth was perfectly steady. So do not stand there being sorry for me, Miss Westham. I hope it is better paper than mine. Mrs. Bewley, said Anne, come and see my hives in the spring. I want somebody to tell about the driving who will argue with me properly. Mrs. Bewley looked at her for a long moment and then said, You put too much sugar in your syrup, girl. Everybody says so. And she went out to her gig. He did not come to Wenlow Cross for 3 weeks. When he came in his own coat in the middle of the afternoon, with the yard full. He asked at the ledge in the arch for a room for a week, and put 7 shillings on the wood. The arch room is let, Anne said, to a corn factor from Bury. Then I will take what you have. I have nothing, Your Grace. Then I will stand here, he said, and be a nuisance to a licensed person. She wiped her hands on her apron. She was aware of Munn at the pump, not looking, and of Betsy in the doorway looking very hard indeed. You have 40 rooms 11 miles off, she said. I know it. I have had the sheets off them all. I went through every one of them in one night with a lamp, and I could not find a single thing in that house that I wanted, and I have found 9 things in this one. He turned his hat round in his hands. I am not asking you to keep a duke's house, Miss Westham. I am asking you whether you would let me be in yours, on whatever terms you can bear, for as long as you can bear it. I have no talent for being what I am. I have some talent for carrying water. Anne went to Ironmore once, in the November, before she answered him. She walked through the 40 rooms with her bonnet on, and her hands folded, and she came out onto the steps and looked at the grass in the sweep for a while. One house, she said, not one for the gentry, and one for the rest. I have not the strength to keep 2, and I am not going to learn. One house, he said. Then yes, said Anne Westham. Her father died on the 14th of November in the afternoon, with the down coach going out under the window. She went up the bank at 6 the next morning, before they came to lay him out, and knocked on 9 skeps, and told them plainly that Thomas Westham was dead. Then she went in and did the rest of it. They were married at Wenlow in the April of the year 17, from the Woolpack, with the licence hanging in the tap-room in her own name still. She kept it 11 days more. Then she wrote a memorial for Margaretta Tuckwell, who had kept that kitchen 22 years and had never had a paper with her name on it. She stood beside her in the long room at the George, while the bench read it out. 3 of the hives went to Ironmore in a cart at walking pace, on straw, with Munn's grandson leading the horse. 6 stayed on the bank, because a bee bank is a bee bank, and the road went the other way. In the September of the year 18, there were 61 pounds of honey off the Wenlow 6, and every jar of it was sold in Draxton, with a paper label that said, in a plain hand, Woolpack, Wenlow Cross. Their daughter was born in the February of 19, and christened Hannah. When she was 4, her father took her up the bank at 5 in the morning, and taught her to stand out of the line of the door. She asked him what the little thing nailed to the 3rd shelter post was for. It was a silver watch with a dent in the case, screwed to the post under a scrap of lead, flashing to keep the rain off, and it had been stopped at 4 in the afternoon for 13 years. That belonged to a man called Jonas Hallett, he said. Ask your mother to tell you about him. She knew his name before she knew mine. At 10 minutes past 4, the horn came up out of the dark, and the mail went through under the arch of a house that a woman kept, and the news it carried was somebody else's. Thank you for listening to the story, all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from, and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss new stories.